So Steve, I understand that you are not Christian, not Muslim.
Indeed.
But you are regular at Speaker's Corner.
I am.
And I heard that England is place where freedom of speech is very important, and Speaker's Corner is the core for the freedom of speech.
Absolutely.
But I am also aware that freedom of speech gets banned in certain areas. Can you just explain it to me what has been happening recently, as well as your feelings on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're certainly right. Freedom of speech is one of the most core, important aspects of British life and British culture. Not only Britain. And it is something that we always have to fight for, be aware of, and be worried when it's trying to be impacted or trying to be reduced or limited by anyone. And certainly, Speaker's Corner is, I feel, it's the home of free speech, and we have to be particularly careful that freedom of speech is never fettered or limited here at Speaker's Corner. And unfortunately, there are some visitors to Speaker's Corner and regulars at Speaker's Corner who don't seem to appreciate the values of freedom of speech, and I always find it highly bizarre that why would anyone choose to come to what is the home of free speech and then be intolerant of people exercising their free speech here? It's simply ridiculous.
So what do you think are the ways, as I express my freedom of speech in certain way, and if you are disagreeing with it, what are the ways to deal with it?
Well, firstly, unless you're inciting or encouraging violence, you simply should be able to say anything, unless you're doing those things. So therefore, it doesn't matter who you're offending, how offensive certain people might feel the words that are coming out of your mouth are. This is freedom of speech. Freedom, there's the famous quote that, without the right to offend, we have no freedom of speech. So therefore, and going back to Speaker's Corner, if you are easily offended by people saying things about your religion, about your prophet, about your Messiah, then just don't come here. Don't put yourself in the scenario where you're going to be offended, because you're certainly not going to come here and silence people. You're certainly not going to come here and prevent people saying certain things that you may disagree with or you may be offended by. Just don't come here. Stay away.
So the things we disagree with one another, the way we deal with it, we openly discuss what we disagree.
We have to deal with it as adults. We're all adults. This is a place for adults. It's not a place for children. Some of my best friends, I have discussions and debates with, and we so strongly disagree with each other. But actually, a sign of a good friendship is that you don't agree on everything. Probably the sign of a good marriage is that you don't agree on everything. But you agree to disagree. You shake hands, you move on, and then you have another discussion the next week. We have to accept that humankind have different views and different opinions and different faiths and no faiths. It's not a reason for a fight. It's not a reason to punch someone because they've said something against your religion. It's the behaviour of the playground. It's the behaviour of the bully. Again, don't come here if you're going to want to punch someone because you're so thin-skinned because you've simply not liked some of the words that person has come out with.
So what I have seen recently has been happening is when people practice their freedom of speech by doing certain researches, people end up in prison. My example for this is Tommy Robinson. He looked at the grooming gangs, which is caused by the teachings of Islam, but today he's in prison. What do you think when it comes to the Islam, how freedom of speech is freely practiced?
Well, I mean, you only need to look around here at Speaker's Corner, and there is only one group of people who, as you know very well yourself, who will brand people that speak out against their religion, do nothing more, nothing less than speak out against their religion as hate preachers. You cannot critique Islam here without being called a hate preacher. Now, Christians don't do that, Jews don't do it, Sikhs don't do that, atheists don't do that. Unfortunately, there is one group whose response to any criticism, any critique, any ridicule is to brand people as far right, as hate preachers, as xenophobes, as racists, as Nazis. That is only coming from one audience who simply don't seem to be able to take criticism of their faith. No other religious group does it, no other political group does it. Unfortunately, it is the many Muslims, not all Muslims, but many Muslims, and the very vocal Muslims at Speaker's Corner, who are trying to silence people. And it is basically Sharia blasphemy law via the back door. They are trying to control what people say and do not say through literal violence, thuggery, intimidation, week in, week out, simply because they're trying to close down any alternative view to them. And that's what people have been pushing back here at Speaker's Corner for the last 2 years probably now, and said that no, you don't control Speaker's Corner, you're not going to control what people say and don't say, you're not going to get away with branding people as hate preachers for doing nothing more than criticising your faith, or shock horror, maybe even ridiculing your faith. That is the freedom of the West. If you don't want that, you have to live in a society like North Korea, like China, like Russia, where the governments imprison, and Saudi Arabia, where the government will imprison you for saying stuff against the government, against the religion. I don't want to live in a North Korea, I don't want to live in a Russia, I don't want to live in a Saudi Arabia. I live in Britain and I love Speaker's Corner for this very, very reason. Because this freedom to express our views, to have dialogue, to disagree with one another, to agree with one another is hugely important, and it's hugely important to me as an individual.
What are your feelings on Tommy Robinson's to be in prison? Because simply I think it's all started with untouchable Islamic grooming gangs, when he touched the untouchable Islamic grooming gangs.
Yep.
And today he's in prison. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see that as against freedom of speech, or do you see Tommy Robinson just intentionally messed up?
Tommy Robinson is a thorn in the side of the state. Tommy Robinson expresses facts that are inconvenient to the government, and therefore I strongly believe Tommy Robinson is continually being persecuted for that. Whether or not he has committed a crime in terms of what he did outside the court, whether or not he committed a crime, no other person in this country has ever been sent to jail for contempt of court. It's never happened before. So as I say, put aside whether he committed the crime or not, I personally think he was a bit foolish to go outside the court. He was already under a warning for doing that before. I wouldn't have done that if I was he. However, no other person. Journalists continually are committing contempt of court. Some of them go to court. Some of them have been convicted. They just have a penalty. Not one person in the history of this country has ever gone to court for that crime. So you have to say, is our judiciary any longer independent? And to me, our judiciary in Britain, which again is a very core important part of our society, our judiciary clearly no longer has any independence, because why is Tommy Robinson, of all people, sitting in Belmarsh as we speak for an alleged crime that no person has ever been imprisoned for? So clearly something untoward is going on. And I think, as I say, it's because he's become a thorn in the side. He was getting increasing publicity, increasing numbers of people were listening to him, which is why they've taken all of his social media away. One by one, they've removed his social media, and he stood in the European elections as an independent councillor, as an independent candidate, and despite the fact that they'd removed all of his social media, he got nearly 40,000 people who voted for him. Without any social media voice, as an independent candidate. No, again, if you look, independent candidates get handfuls of votes. He got nearly 40,000 people. And the state knows the power of his message, and that is why he's sitting in Belmarsh. Without a doubt, in my view, and I kind of like to think I'm not a stupid man, I'm not an unbiased man, he is a thorn in the side of this state, and they try and shut him up.
You think it's his previous conduct could have done this? Do you think
he is not the Messiah. He is not a perfect man, and there is, and I don't agree with this, there has developed a bit of a cult of Tommy Robinson, and it shouldn't be about the man, it should be about the cause. So, and he is not a perfect man. He's got a colourful past. He's done stuff. He's been a naughty boy in the past. However, if you look at all of the recent charges that have been thrown at him, they are quite simply trumped up. And most of the charges that have been thrown at him, now that he has financial backing and he can pay for lawyers, most of the charges that they've thrown at him have just disappeared. They've disappeared because he now has legal defence in court. So they're not getting away with it as lightly. But the fact that his current alleged offence, it was heard in the Old Bailey. So again, not only has no other person ever been put in prison for this, they've not been heard at the Old Bailey either. Why would what is, let's face it, a relatively low-level charge be dragged through the courts repeatedly in the Old Bailey? Why would the Attorney General be involved in a case of this nature? You know, there is aspect after aspect of this case that clearly it's not a normal case. Clearly, our judiciary is no longer independent, because you don't drag a matter that's never resulted in a custodial sentence through the Old Bailey. You don't drag the Attorney General into it. You know, the leading legal person in the government. You know, on every front, it is nonsense. Yeah. Is the media talking about it? No. I again say, whatever you believe, whatever you feel about Tommy Robinson, whether you agree with him, whether you agree with his stance, his politics, his methods, whether you agree with it or not, just look at those facts. Alleged contempt of court, Old Bailey, Attorney General, Belmarsh Prison. It's a little bit out of proportion, isn't it? And why would that be? Why would that be?
So, have you ever come across with anyone in your lifetime that their book has been banned from
Books that's been banned?
Yeah, books are being banned because what the information is in the book. No. So you can write whatever you want to write, but when it comes to the certain individuals,
my understanding, whether it's written in a book or whether it's verbally here at Speaker's Corner, unless you're inciting violence or murder, that's pretty much the limits to freedom of speech in this country. So, you know, there's a misconception, you can't say anything rude about the Queen. Not true. You know, I could stand here now and completely slag off the Queen and say rude things about the Queen. No one's going to arrest me. You know, people go on about, you can't deny the Holocaust. In Germany you can't, in here you can. And there are many idiots that do deny the Holocaust. In fact, there are increasing numbers of people that are denying the Holocaust. I think they're completely mad and ridiculous. But I would never make that illegal, because they need to be exposed. They need to be shown up for what they are.
So when you look at overall what's happening at Speaker's Corner, also around UK, when it comes to the freedom of speech, where do you think it is taking you? You are British people, so where is it taking you? Or people who live in Britain?
Well, it worries me hugely that there seems to be, well, certainly attempts, but more worryingly, placation of those attempts to somehow limit our freedom of speech. In my view, you know, the Equality Act is a really good, sound piece of legislation. But the one aspect of the Equality Act that I think was a step too far was giving legal protection to religion. Because at the end of the day, you don't choose your gender, you don't choose your ethnicity, you don't choose your sexuality, but you do choose your religion. So therefore, should a choice get the same legal protection as what comes out of your genetics, your gender, your ethnicity? It shouldn't. And I think that's a slippery slope to certain religious people trying to stop other people saying stuff. Because unoffended. You know, my religion, my belief is X, Y, and Z. He's just ridiculed X, Y, and Z. That's caused me offence. I worry that there's a slippery slope to this sort of nonsense.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Pleasure.